in September, but it is. So thank you for being here. I know there's a lot of places that we could be that might include a dock and a chair and water, but this is an important topic, and our community is certainly impacted by it, so I am grateful that all of you are here. Do we have any? Just a few. Okay. I'm going to start us in prayer. Father God, thank you for this beautiful evening. Thank you for this fall warm weather and the beauty of the sun. Lord, I just pray that this evening you would be honored and glorified, that you would be the guiding light in our understanding of what it means to be living with Alzheimer's. Lord, I pray that you would also help us to understand what our role is in caring for one another as the body of Christ. Lord, would you just be with us? Would you allow this information to be exactly what each of us needs at this time? Would you also allow this information to be what we need for a future time? And Lord, would you just allow us to love one another well? And would you bless our fellowship and bless our presenter and speaker? And I ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so how did this class even come about? As you recall, some of you may recall, I guess, last year in June, we did a class called Death and Dying. And we did that class because it had been a particularly difficult year for Timberwood, and there had been many deaths. And people were realizing that people were, A, not prepared for death, and family members were not prepared to walk alongside people when they were ill and nearing the end of their life. And so how can we equip people was the question that kept being asked, and so we put that class together as a response to what our community was asking. And so the same is with this. Our community of Timberwood in particular, and we know outside of Timberwood, is affected by Alzheimer's, and all of us are touched by it in some way, or we will be. And so lots of questions that we have been hearing over the past year, for me in particular, like, I don't know how to support so-and-so. I don't know how to talk to them anymore. I don't know how to come alongside so-and-so's husband or wife. What should I do? And I can certainly help, like everybody else, in giving suggestions and ideas, but I don't fully understand the disease of Alzheimer's. And so I went through and looked for local resources, and there are some, but they're hard, like, to find. I had a hard time finding things that people wanted, like a support group and that kind of thing. And so I thought, well, what a great way for us to pull these resources together and pull this information together, record it, invite the community. So maybe some of you heard the information about this class on the radio, and so welcome. And that's where this came from, this need that we have to acknowledge that Alzheimer's is a real thing in our community, and many, many people are impacted by it. How do we love and care for one another? How do we come alongside one another? One of the things that we talked about last year in our class in the summer is this call to care for one another. And it feels like one of those things like, well, yeah, we're called to care for one another. As followers of Christ, as Christians, we are called to be Christ-like and care for one another the way Christ did. And so I'm reminded, and I feel like this particular scripture from Matthew has been repeated so many times over the last 2 years, whether it be when we went through the book of Matthew on Wednesday nights or in our preaching. But I am particularly drawn to Jesus's example of caring for one another. He was a healer, right? And we can't always be healers in a physical sense, but we certainly can come alongside and in an emotional and a loving and caring sense be soothing and healing in a relational type of way. And so in Matthew chapter 25, in verses 34 through 40. This is familiar. This probably is familiar to many of you. Jesus says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me.'" And so it's this profound reminder of our call to care for one another, and Jesus as a healer. We are followers of Christ. And it's interesting to me, and I love the history of the church, and I love what the church was called to. So these followers of Jesus, they're building the church in the early, first century, and then 500 years beyond. It's new. They're called to worship together. They're called to come together and care for one another. And so that's what they did, right? They're called to care for one another, and you see people from the church caring for people who were sick. There were not hospitals or infirmaries or emergency rooms or care facilities back then. It was the church that was coming alongside people that were ill. And so this is the message, this is the inspiration behind what is our response? Can we look to what Jesus has done and replicate that? How do we come alongside? How do we care for one another? So here at Timberwood, we have care ministry, right? We care for one another. We have divorce care and grief share. We have a meal train. We have accessibility efforts that we put forth. There's so many ways that we can be deliberately caring for one another. And it's easy to say we have these things, but it's a completely different thing to be equipped to care and to have a better understanding of what it is that we need to see, recognize, acknowledge, and come alongside. And so because I am by no means an expert on Alzheimer's, I did my homework, and I found Arlene Sellender, and she's actually from Aiken. And you want to come on up? Arlene is from Aiken. She is actually a volunteer community educator for the Minnesota Alzheimer's Association. And so she has some fabulous information for us. She's got a table out there, if you didn't see it on your way in. She's got a table out there full of resources that she's going to leave tonight, and she'll leave with me. And she will be back next week and the week after to present what the Minnesota Alzheimer's Association knows, the research, the information, the most up-to-date things that we need to know and be equipped with in order to come alongside. So if on the table, the round table when you walked in, there were 3 pieces of paper, the teacher in me just needs to give you something to take notes on. And if you're not a note taker, that's fine, but I want it to be available to you. So there's 3 pieces of paper out there, and it is week 1, week 2, and week 3. And if you just grabbed week 1, that is fine. If you grabbed all 3, that's fine too. But what I do want to just reiterate quickly right from the get-go is in all 3 classes, we will talk about the warning signs. We'll talk about Alzheimer's and dementia as well. The warning signs. We'll talk about building the foundation for caregiving. We see a lot of caregivers in our community, and we'll talk about what that entails. We'll talk about the impact of family and friends when somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then how do we support the caregiver? How do we come alongside the caregiver? That's one of the biggest questions that I have been asked over the last 2 years. And then also communicating effectively. How do you communicate with somebody who maybe has lapses in what they can remember and what they can do or who you are. And so Arlene will help us with that as well. And then on that last evening, on the 26th, we'll talk about healthy living for your body and your brain, the latest research in what can help us as we age, maybe not to completely ward off, but to make it, what's the word I'm looking for?
Protective factors.
Protective factors, there you go. Just to protect us. So if we know better, we can do better, right? So those will be shared on the last night. And then also resources and support that is available. And like locally, what is it that people need? What is it that we have to offer in our area? And there will be opportunity for questions at the end of every night. Or are you okay with questions in the midst?
Absolutely.
We didn't rehearse this part. Okay.
Yes, I'm okay with questions.
Okay. All right. So raise your hand, ask questions if you want during, and then just know that there will be time set aside for questions and responses afterwards as well. So, any questions at this point? Yep.
You just mentioned that I'll be around afterwards.
Yes. Arlene also said that she would be around afterward. If you don't want to ask a question in front of the entire group, she'll be here to answer questions privately too. So, all right. Thank you for being here. I'm passing it on to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. As Amy said, my name is Arlene Sealander. I live in Aiken. I have 6 kids, and 5 of them are grown up and gone. I lost my dad in 2014 to Alzheimer's. I was 30 years old, and I had 5 older brothers and sisters. I guess I still have them. I have 5 older brothers and sisters. I am the baby. My closest sibling is 10 years older than I am. And so they decided when my dad wasn't doing so well, and we had to have a point of contact with the facility that he was in, that because I'm a social worker, I knew what I was doing, and I should be that point of contact. I had no idea what I was doing. I was used to being on the other side of the desk. And at that time, I was a single parent. I was working a full-time job and a part-time job and having to try to take care of all the things that were going on with my dad, and doctors and phone calls, and oh my goodness, I don't know how I did it. I must have been a lot younger and had more energy or something. I don't know how I did. But nobody ever told me that there was resources available. Nobody ever told me, hey, you should contact the Alzheimer's Association. I've heard of the Alzheimer's Association. They did a walk, right? That's what they did. That's all I knew they did. So when I learned what the Alzheimer's Association has to offer besides a yearly walk, I knew that I had to be involved somehow, and I had to make sure that every single person knows that you don't have to do this alone. There are so many resources, so many people that will walk alongside you and help you. It's not on your own. So that is how I got involved with the Alzheimer's Association, and that is my why. So tonight we are here to we're going to talk about understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. We're going to talk about the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, and then we're going to kind of segue into some very common warning signs. So this program was created by the Alzheimer's Association. It is designed for those that are interested in learning more about Alzheimer's and dementias. There are some short video clips from some of our experts that are doctors and are a lot smarter than what I am. We also, throughout the evening, we're going to say care partner. And this is a term that that we use instead of caregiver because it sounds more caring. I just used care 3 times in one sentence. But a care partner can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be somebody in the congregation. We all can be care partners. And I'm going to try really hard not to disconnect this. I was given strict instructions. All right. So today we're going to take a top-level look at Alzheimer's and dementia. This will give us a broader understanding of the diseases. So by the end of this evening, the goal is for you to be able to compare Alzheimer's and dementia, recognize how Alzheimer's can affect the brain, list some of the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, identify the 3 stages of the disease. We'll talk a little bit about current FDA-approved treatments, and we will describe how scientists are working to advance research. And at the end of each evening that I'm here, we will go over the Alzheimer's resources and what they have. So that part will be kind of repetitive, but it's important. So Alzheimer's is a global crisis, and we're hearing more and more about it, either in our personal life, on the news. Our neighbors are talking about it. It affects all of us. So we're going to start off with a little quiz. That's why Amy put those papers up there. So we're quizzing. So we will start off by seeing about the impact of Alzheimer's just in the United States. So in your mind, or to your neighbor, if you want to shout it out, I'm good with that too. Approximately how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's? Do we think? So if you said more than 6 million, you're right. Worldwide, there is an estimated 50 million people that are currently living with some sort of dementia disease. In our own country, there's more than 6 million people. Excuse me. The number is actually projected to be nearly 13 million by the year 2050. And when you think about it, 2050 seems like a long time away, but it's really not. I disconnected. The look of panic, I'm sure, sorry. Oh. Okay, so another quiz for us here is about how many Americans provide unpaid care for people that are living with Alzheimer's or another dementia. Currently, there are over 11 million Americans that are providing unpaid care for people living with Alzheimer's or another dementia. Alzheimer's impacts caregivers both at work and at home. More than 80% of care that is provided at home is delivered by family members, friends, and other unpaid caregivers. Over half of the employed caregivers report having to go into work late, having to take time off. Some have even reported that they have needed to quit their job altogether. The caregivers have provided approximately 15.3 billion hours of care just last year. And that is valued at $257 billion. Those people could have been paid. So as we see, this disease takes a personal impact on the individuals facing the disease, as well as it's a huge financial impact as well. So we're going to go over a few more stats. So you may hear the words, excuse me, Alzheimer's and dementia used interchangeably. And they are related, but they are also different. In this next section, we are going to discuss both Alzheimer's and dementia and how they're related. But before we begin, another little quiz question. Now, Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. True or false? Yeah, it is false. Alzheimer's disease is more than just memory loss. It is a progressive disease, and it is a fatal disease. It's a disease that kills nerve cells and tissue in the brain, and it affects an individual's ability to remember, to think, to plan, ultimately to function. So let's try another one. People younger than 65 can get Alzheimer's. True or false? True. 65 is not the magic number. While most individuals that are living with the disease are older adults, people younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's. So this form of Alzheimer's is known as early onset. Sometimes we call it younger onset. In some cases, people in their 40s or 50s have developed Alzheimer's. So we are going to watch a video. It's just very quick. All of our videos tonight are like 2 minutes long, the most. With Dr. Heather Snyder. She works with the Alzheimer's Association, and she's going to tell us about how Alzheimer's and dementia are related.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So, as we saw, there are many causes of dementia other than Alzheimer's. However, about 60 to 80% of all dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's. There are numerous types of dementia, as we talked. Each has different causes and have different symptoms. So those that are listed are just a few of those different types of dementia. A diagnosis of dementia requires further testing to identify the specific cause or disease that are causing the symptoms. It is important to seek an accurate and early diagnosis. So as we move on, we are going to talk to Gail, and she is a care partner.
Certainly having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
So, a quick recap on dementia and Alzheimer's. Again, dementia is a general term for a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to interfere with somebody's daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It is a progressive brain disease. Well, there we go. Next, we are going to look at at what happens to the brain when Alzheimer's disease is present. So as we said, Alzheimer's is a disease of the brain. And our brain is our most complex organ. It's also our most powerful, and it only weighs 3 pounds, approximately. So we are going to hear, again, from one of our experts who's better at talking about the brain and its many functions than I am.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So as Dr. Carrillo talked about, Dr. Alzheimer, I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name, and I'm not going to try. So we're just going to call him Dr. Alzheimer. He described the specific changes in the brain, the formation of the plaques and tangles, and that's who the disease was named after, obviously. Alzheimer's causes nerve cells to die, and that actually leads to the shrinkage of the brain. So the changes in the brain may result in changes in memory, changes in thinking, changes in behavior. Oftentimes when we think of somebody that has dementia, Alzheimer's, we think that their behavior changes for the worst. Maybe they become angry when they weren't angry before. Maybe they become a little bit combative. And that is true, that can happen. But the opposite can happen too, where they can actually become nicer. That was my experience. My dad was born in 1936, and he was kind of a crabby old coot. He really was. I love him to pieces, but oh my goodness, he could be really cranky at times and very stuck in his ways. But as his disease progressed, he changed. When I left the facility that he was at one night, so I grew up in a household that we didn't say I love you. There was no hugs. We didn't show emotions. We just were. And so I was telling my sister, who is 16 years older than I am, I said, all I want is for Dad to tell me that he loves me. That's all I want. I don't want anything else. And she kind of, scoffed. She was like, yeah, right. But one night I was leaving, and like I always did, I gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek, and I said, I love you, Dad. I'll see you tomorrow. And it was always, kind of like a grunting, or once in a while get an okay. But one night, he said, okay, I love you too. And I sat in my car and cried for probably 45 minutes. I'm surprised they didn't call law enforcement, but that's all I wanted. And he said it a couple other times after that too, and I knew that in my heart I knew that my dad had always loved me, but to hear it even as a 30-year-old for the first time from my dad, it was pretty impactful. So I just want to remind everybody that the behaviors aren't always negative that we do. So let's talk about some risk factors. Everybody that has a brain is at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So I'm guessing that's most of us. Don't ask my husband, because sometimes he'll be like, no, it's not you. You're good to go. There are very few known factors that increase a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's. So let's talk about some risk factors and take another little magic quiz. What is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's? Genetics, a family history, or age? If you are thinking it is genetics, you're not right. Family history, you're also wrong. It's age. All of these are known risk factors, but age is our greatest risk factor. After the age of 65, the risk of developing Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. 34% of people age 85 or older are living with the disease. So now we're going to hear again from one of our experts on this.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
So again, I want to reiterate that Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging, and that our age really is our greatest risk factor. So we are going to move forward and talk about some of the populations that are most at risk for developing the disease. Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at higher risk for Alzheimer's. Research does show that older Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely as older whites to develop Alzheimer's and other dementias, while older African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as older white people. The reason for these differences is not well understood, but researchers do believe that higher rates of vascular disease in these groups may also put them at that greater risk for developing Alzheimer's. Women are more likely than men to develop the disease. An estimated 3.8 million American women are living with the disease today. So we know that women typically live longer than men. I can tell you my theory on why women live longer than men, but I could even show you some pictures. But we're not going to get into that. Bless my husband's heart. The longevity and lower death rate can only partially explain the difference. Researchers are doing some scientific exploration on the differences between men and women and how those differences impact the disease. All right, quick little recap to summarize what we just went over real quick is Alzheimer's disease involves the failure of nerve cells. We don't know the exact cause. However, research has linked risk factors to increase the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's. Age is our greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. An individual's risk for developing the disease increases exponentially after the age of 65. And while family history is a known risk factor, and having a parent or sibling with the disease can increase an individual's risk. There are two types of genes that are associated with Alzheimer's, those risk genes and those deterministic genes. Hispanics, African Americans, and women have an increased risk of developing this disease. No two individuals experience the symptoms and the progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. Every journey is different, yet every journey is almost sort of the same. Doesn't make sense, but it is. We all experience it differently, but we all experience it as we're walking through. So this next slide that has three people that are living with dementia, and they're going to talk a little bit about their experience and what they're going through. So we'll start with Teresa.
I'm like an overachiever. And when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
And then we'll move on to Phil and then Tom.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life. You know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more, and they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
I have seen these three talk in this video through the last several years, and I just noticed yesterday when I was going through the presentation for tonight that Tom has an earring. Never noticed it. 2+ years, he must have done it over the long weekend or something. I don't know, but I just noticed an earring, and I was like, oh, holy moly. So again, the individuals that we just heard from, they're living with the early stages of the disease. We can move on to the next slide, thank you. Symptoms worsen over time for everybody. However, people progress through stages of Alzheimer's at different rates as their ability changes. So on average, a person with Alzheimer's lives 4 to 8 years after their diagnosis, but they can live as long as 20 years. And that, of course, depends on other factors. So this slide here there's a continuum, and we're just going to go right through here. On this continuum, there are 3 broad phases. The teals, the asymptomatic, the MCI due to Alzheimer's disease, and then dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. In that first phase, there may be changes in that person's brain long before symptoms begin or that before there's a diagnosis. As the disease progresses, that person will begin to experience some mild symptoms on and off. May be noticeable, it may not be noticeable. But they will still mostly be able to independently perform their daily activities. And in this phase, they may be moving on to having that diagnosis of an MCI, which is a mild cognitive impairment. I'm a social worker, so I love acronyms. My son is in the military, so I love acronyms. I just say things in letters. So as this graph or arrow shows, MCI is an early stage of Alzheimer's disease, meaning the hallmark changes to the brain, such as the amyloid buildup, are present. And MCI can develop for reasons, and individuals living with that MCI may go on to develop dementia due to Alzheimer's. Others will not. So in this third phase, in the purple phase, people who do develop Alzheimer's will experience more serious changes in their memory, in their thinking, and their behavior. They further break down the stages in this stage into 3 substages: mild, moderate, and severe. Sometimes they are referred to as early, middle, and late. These stages reflect the degree in which the symptoms are present and which those symptoms interfere with the daily, everyday activities. It's important to understand that the stages of Alzheimer's are very general, because we aren't all the same. Each person living with the disease has a unique experience. We can't always neatly place an individual in one of those stages. Sometimes the stages overlap. Sometimes the progression is so fast that you miss a stage. However, the stages do kind of allow us to gain a general understanding of how the disease progresses. As Alzheimer's progresses, the individual's behaviors may change. And as those behaviors change, the role of the caregiver also changes. So these stages can actually prepare caregivers, care partners, however we want to say it, it can prepare us on what to expect and understand how to best respond. So I believe it is next week that we're going to talk about communication and how to best communicate with somebody that has Alzheimer's or dementia. So we can move ahead. There we go. So again, a recap on the stages of Alzheimer's is that the stages are very broad. We have the asymptomatic, the mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, due to Alzheimer's, and dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. The dementia phase is further broken down into those mild, moderate, severe, early, middle, late, however we want to say it. And no 2 individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. While symptoms worsen over time, people progress through the stages at different rates. All right, so we are going to talk a little bit about FDA-approved treatments. And I'm just going to warn you all, these medications are like, the names are like this long. And I'm going to butcher them. But I can, if you want, I can write them down at the end for you. I can spell them correctly. Not without looking, though. So the treatments, until now, the only treatments available helped with some of the cognitive symptoms of Alzheimer's. However, they don't modify or slow the disease. So the treatments that may help address symptoms of Alzheimer's include Aricept. And the generic name for that is donepezil. I have it written phonetically. Exelon, and the generic version of that is rivastigmine, and razidine, which is galantamine. I think I did okay. There's a couple others, and some of them actually combine the properties of several. So the most, in June 7th of 2021, the FDA approved, the Alzheimer's Association was granted accelerated approval by the FDA for a medication called aducanumab. I have no idea. I wrote it phonetically. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. In fact, I know I am. But it is the first treatment that actually addresses the underlying biology of Alzheimer's disease. So it's pretty exciting. I was able to go to the Alzheimer's Association annual summit in New Orleans in February. That was an experience. If you've ever been to New Orleans in February, it was quite the experience for some of us. My parents always flew me home during Mardi Gras when I lived at Fort Polk, and I got to experience all by myself. It was interesting. I was pretty scared the whole time, but that's okay. But because everybody, there we go. Oh, we can move it, sorry. We are going to talk about, because everybody does experience Alzheimer's differently, the treatments do work differently. And with any sort of medication or treatment, it's not effective for everybody. But we do encourage people who are interested in learning more about the treatments, either for themselves or for a family member, friend, to have a conversation with your healthcare provider or their healthcare provider. And you can learn more on the alz.org on their treatment tabs. And we can, next slide, thank you. So in the last decade, researchers have made enormous strides in understanding how this disease affects the brain. So most recently, the insights are pointing towards promising new strategies for treatment, prevention, and diagnosis. So at Summit, we got to hear all about them, and it is exciting. It is really exciting. Every day we're getting one step closer to solving this extremely difficult puzzle. And I personally think that the first survivor of Alzheimer's is out there. The first survivor is walking around. We don't know who it is. But with the research and the drug medications and treatments, I think that person is out there, the first survivor. So we are going to talk some more about the medication part and the treatment part from some of our Alzheimer's folks. We'll start with Dr. Heather, and we'll just kind of move around.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day, and I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
So as we just heard, there is really a lot of hope to where we're headed with research. One of the key ways to keep research moving in the right direction is through clinical studies. Scientists are looking for new ways to treat Alzheimer's, and there are, as we talked about, there are many drugs currently being used, and there's many more that are in the research pipeline, coming down the pipeline. They're doing the studies. How do they do studies? Well, they have to recruit and retain participants, and that's their greatest struggle, other than funding. So to develop the next generation of Alzheimer's, yeah. Money, funding, yeah. The Alzheimer's Association is a nonprofit, and I mean they have big fundraisers, but the financial part is very, very expensive. I can just about imagine. So those are our biggest factors to developing treatments, is to finding those that are willing to be part of the studies. So we are going to hear from Dr. I think his name is Fargo. Yes, Dr. Fargo, about the clinical studies that the Alzheimer's Association is conducting.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention.
So as we heard, it's very critical for people to volunteer and want to be a part of this trial. I'm not here to recruit anybody for trial studies. I'm not. But it is important that we have a diverse group of people of different races and ethnicities that want to participate in the trials, because we're not all the same, right? So the more diversity we have, the better the trials are going to go. So we will just do a quick recap on the research part of it. So as we talked about, scientists have... Well, that's okay. I think I actually had this problem when I was reviewing it. So we can move ahead a couple. There we go. Scientists have increased their understanding of Alzheimer's significantly over the past decade. People living with the disease, their caregivers, and healthy individuals without dementia are needed to participate in clinical studies in order for us to find methods of prevention, treatment, and ultimately a cure. Both drug and non-drug studies are taking place across our country. Clinical studies may provide participants with cutting-edge treatment and access to additional health care. The trial match is free. It's a free service that we offer through the association for people that are interested in being a part of the research. Alzheimer's is difficult, however, like I said before, no one has to face this alone. You do not have to be alone. There's a lot of people that will walk beside you and go with you. So we are going to move on into some warning signs of Alzheimer's. 10 warning signs, and on the table out there are, I think they're bookmarks that have the 10 warning signs on them. It's kind of helpful to look at once in a while. So help yourself to those. If we need more, I have more. So in this portion, we are going to explore the most common warning signs of Alzheimer's. It's going to help inform us on what's normal aging and what's not. So by the end of this session, we will be able to describe typical age-related memory, thinking, and behavioral changes. We're going to recognize some of the most common warning signs of Alzheimer's, and we are going to talk about some tips for approaching somebody about memory concerns. We're also going to talk a little more about the importance of early detection and the benefits of detection, as well as go over just some possible tests and assessments for that diagnostic process. And then at the very last, we will talk about the different resources, a few of the different resources that the association has to offer. So we will go to the next slide. Thank you. I just left it there. We can go to the next one now. All right. There we go. Now we're cooking. So, again, we're all here to learn more today. Learn how to support each other, support our neighbors, our friends, our caregivers, how to support yourself, and how we can support one another. So, again, we often use the term Alzheimer's and dementia very interchangeably. We already learned how they are separated, but this slide, we're going to skip over this one. We're going to not talk about Mary because we don't have time.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more
That's
noticeable
okay.
for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. And then they start misplacing things. But not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
So if you want to skip ahead to the slide that kind of looks like a checkerboard or a Candyland board.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's
100
changes
years
in
ago.
memory.
We already
Dr.
talked about
Alzheimer.
the umbrella terms and all that good jazz. Here we go. Perfect. I think we should be on track now. So we heard previously that it's important to know what signs to look for and how to be on the lookout. So the Alzheimer's Association, they're a leader in this area of identifying signs and working with the disease. This list that we have is intended to be a tool to help identify unusual changes in a person's memory, thinking, or behavior. It's important to note that this is not an all-exhaustive list, and it does not constitute as a diagnosis. I did go to college long enough to be a doctor, but I'm not. And individuals may experience one or more of these symptoms, in different degrees. So we are going to kind of break down each of the 10 most common signs. So we can go ahead and move on to memory loss that disrupts our daily life. So one of the most common signs of Alzheimer's, especially early on, is forgetting the recently learned information. Others include forgetting important dates or events, repeatedly asking the same questions, and increasingly relying on memory aids or leaning on others to for things or tasks that person once handled on their own. A typical age-related change is sometimes forgetting information, but then remembering them later. And we'll move on to sign number 2. Challenges in planning or solving problems. Some people may experience new difficulties in their executive functioning, and this includes the ability to develop or follow a plan, a difficulty concentrating, whereas a more age-related change is making the occasional error when managing maybe paying a bill or managing your household finances. So we are going to hear from John, who again is living with Lewy body dementia, and he's going to talk about what his early warning sign was. I believe we talked to John earlier too.
Ago.
Sounds like
Because of the, I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking this, I was in my sleep, I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was I was trying to remember, which was I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was a really a vicious circle of, so I was able to control it a lot, so that people wouldn't see things and there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
Okay, and on to sign number 3, which is difficulty completing familiar tasks. People living with dementia often find it hard to complete those daily tasks that they used to manage with ease. This could include driving to work, driving to any familiar place, or maybe it's even writing out a grocery list or remembering how to play a favorite game. So I first knew that something was not quite right with my dad. That didn't come out how I wanted it to. So like I said, my dad was born during the Depression. He could fix anything. Whether it was safe or not, it always worked. But he could make anything better. So I went to a big box store and bought a bookshelf that needed to be put together, right? I had no idea how to do it. That's why I had a dad and brothers, because they could always put stuff together for me. And so my dad came over, and he was sitting on the floor. He took it all out, and this should have taken him like 10 minutes tops. And he was just kind of looking at the things, and he looks at me and says, "Leni, I can't do this." What? Are you kidding? You're the person who took my baby swing because it kept going through more batteries when my son was little, and hooked it up so it had electricity in it to swing my baby. He's still doing well. I mean, he twitches every now and then, and he could put together a bookcase. So that is when I really knew that something was a little bit askew, and we watched it for a couple of years, and that was that. However, a typical age-related change could be needing help with the remote for the TV, right? My husband works out of town, and I have a 15-year-old daughter, and it's just the two of us are at home, and if she happens to be somewhere, I'm just out of luck because I have no idea how to turn the TV on, much less like figure out anything else. So that's when I read, because I don't know how to do anything else. Or changing the clock in your car, if it doesn't automatically change, that one's we're not even going to go there. So let's talk, we're going to hear a little bit more on this from one of our fabulous experts.
Some people have difficulty with math or with reading in a way that's unusual to them. And once again, this is a change in that person. So for example, we all know somebody who was never able to balance their checkbook, right? So that wouldn't be a warning sign for them. But if somebody who always balanced their checkbook to the penny suddenly was paying bills, the same bill over and over, and not able to balance their finances, well, that would be a sign for them.
Okay, we can move on to sign number 4, which is confusion with time and place. An individual that is living with Alzheimer's or another dementia-related disease may lose track of dates, seasons, passage of time. I've been working at home since the pandemic. Now I'm self-employed. My husband works wonky hours, so sometimes he's working day shifts, sometimes he's working night shifts. He works out of town, so sometimes he's home on the weekends, sometimes he's home during the week. I have no idea. And so during the summer, when my daughter's at home and doesn't have to go to school, sometimes I have no idea what day of the week it is. Thankfully, school has started, so now I know what day of the week it is, most of the time. But somebody that has dementia or Alzheimer's can lose track of the seasons or passage of time. They may also have trouble understanding something if it is not currently happening, or becoming confused about where they are or even how they got there. This can become more dramatic or profound in the middle to late stages of the disease, whereas a more typical age-related change could be getting confused about what day it is or when a scheduled appointment is, but then being able to figure it out later. So we'll move on to number 5, which is trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Some individuals that have Alzheimer's or another dementia may experience vision problems. This can lead to difficulty with balance, trouble reading, problems judging distance and determining color and contrast. So this all can impact driving, which is a very, very tough subject to talk about. But we will, not tonight, but I believe when we talk about communicating, we do have a part on driving. And it's not fun, but we talk about it. Vision changes such as cataracts, that's a more age-related change. This sign shows us that these changes are not just about our memory, that it's important to think about all the other ways that somebody's life is impacted by these changes. So we're going to hear again from one of our fabulous experts.
Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It can affect other things too. It can affect the way that we perceive what we see. So sometimes somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's might go to the eye doctor because they're having trouble seeing, and in fact, their vision is just fine, but the way they're perceiving what they're seeing may be difficult.
I want to call her Dr. Ruth. That's not her. I don't know if she's a doctor, but I want to call her Dr. Ruth so bad. We'll move to number 6, which is new problems with words in speaking or writing. Individuals may have trouble following or joining a conversation. Maybe they stop in the middle of a conversation and forget what they were talking about, or continuously repeating themselves. They may also struggle to find the right word or call things by the wrong name. They may use more descriptive terms to talk about something rather than the name of the actual item. this is my favorite part of this whole presentation, because my dad always wore a watch, and as he progressed in his disease, he didn't know what it was. He couldn't remember, so he called it his wrist clock. I still call it that sometimes. I'm like, my wrist clock is missing. But a normal age-related change would be, trouble finding the right word. And when I do that, I always say, oh, I forget the English word for that. Then people don't think. So we are going to actually skip over Phil, because we watched this exact same clip on how he has forgotten words when he is going on.
The other
Perfect. Number 7, misplacing and losing things and not having the ability to retrace steps. So this sign often causes concern. I do want to just clarify that this isn't just about losing your car keys every once in a while, or misplacing things from time to time and then retracing your steps to find them. That's pretty normal. A person with Alzheimer's may lose things and not be able to recall where they last seen them, or identify the location where they last, where they think they may have placed them. They're unable to retrace their steps. Maybe they're putting things in unusual spots, putting your shoes in the refrigerator. Because of that lack of executive function and awareness, a person may grow increasingly suspicious of others and start accusing anybody and everybody of stealing their things. So Dr. Ruth is going to explain this a little bit further.
So some people wonder if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say about that is, for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it. We can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in, they set their keys down in an unusual space, so there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably remember, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door. I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
So sign number 8 is decreased or poor judgment. I like to say the decrease of judgment, because I think we all have poor judgment sometimes, once in a while. So individuals may experience changes in judgment or the ability to make decisions. They may use poor judgments when dealing with money. Maybe they're paying less attention to hygiene or housekeeping. Unfortunately, this can be especially common in people that live alone. Making a bad decision once in a while, such as forgetting to get an oil change in your car, is a more typical age-related change. So we will talk to Teresa about what her sign was.
The way I kept my house, and all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like I was a pet wreck, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
Oh, the good old laundry chair. I've got one of those. Sign number 9, withdrawing from work or social activities. As we age, it's normal for us to feel sometimes uninterested by family or social engagements at times. There's always that thing you said you wanted to go to and agreed to go to, and you're secretly hoping that person will call and cancel. I think that's pretty normal as we get older. However, someone who is experiencing a dementia-related change, they may start to lose their ability to hold or follow a conversation. They may begin withdrawing from these social encounters or hobbies because they lose their confidence in being able to engage in that way socially. So we will hear again from one of our fabulous experts.
One of the most common changes, and early on, is the person's comfort zone shrinks a little bit, and then that gets worse throughout the course of the illness. So they're less comfortable going out, they're less motivated to do things than they were in the past. So there's some change in day-to-day functioning that way. I think people also lose confidence in their cognitive abilities because they may not recognize someone or know their name or find the right word, and they'll feel awkward, and they don't want people to notice that, so they feel more comfortable at home or in situations with family where they're very, very comfortable with that wouldn't concern them. So people tend to withdraw a little bit and be less outgoing. That's can be one of the early signs of Alzheimer's.
And sign number 10, changes in mood and personality. We kind of touched on this a little bit. Individuals with Alzheimer's or other dementia-related disease, they may become confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or even anxious. They might easily get upset, either at home or especially when they're out of their comfort zone. As we age, it's normal to develop a very specific way of doing things, and then maybe we become a little upset or irritable when our routine gets disrupted. I mean, I'm sure none of us have deal with that, but someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, however, they may become fearful, angry, and easily frustrated at the littlest things. So we are going to recap quick these 10 versions. We could skip Dr. Sal away. So again, these are just a guide to identify problems that may be related to Alzheimer's. Individuals may experience one or multiple of these signs in varying degrees, but they don't have to experience them all for there to be a concern. If you notice any of these signs in yourself or somebody else, we do encourage you to talk to your doctor. We can scooch on through. And one more. Fabulous. So now we're going to talk about, real quick, we're just going to go through how do we address this with somebody when we have noticed one of these warning signs. And that was going to be the part of the early detection. So we can, next, thank you. We are not going to watch the videos because we're running short on time. So step 1, we can go there.
You know,
There we go. What changes in memories or thinking or behaviors do you see? What is that person doing or not doing that's causing your concern? Just make a note of it. Sometimes it's helpful to actually write it down, what they're doing, and what else was going on at the time. We'll move into step 2 on what else was going on. But keep a notebook. It doesn't have to be an extensive diary. It can just be a quick little list. But that way you have specifics when it comes time to have that conversation. So step number 2, what else is going on? Various conditions can cause changes in memories and your thinking or behavior. Maybe there are some other health or lifestyle issues that could be contributing to these changes. Maybe there's stress or an underlying health condition, or maybe even a change in medication that can be causing the changes. We'll move on to step 3. Various conditions can cause changes in memory, again, thinking and behavior. So there's so many different ways about why we need to learn more about that person. If we're not close to them, we need to take into consideration the whole, what we're all seeing. So being able to do this is one of the, we learned about the signs. We've talked about the benefits of an early detection with the medication and the treatments. Step number 4, has anybody else noticed the changes? Talk to that person's friends, their family, people that they're closest with. And next, we're going to have a conversation. So we will move on to step number 5. Who should be the one to have that conversation? It could be you, it could be another family member or friend, or maybe it's a combination. It is usually best to speak to that person one-on-one so that they don't feel threatened or ambushed or like we're holding an intervention. But you know the person better than I do, and so you can judge what type of approach might work. And step number 6, when and where should the conversation be held? This one is it's kind of common sense, but we still need to address it because that is very important on the outcome of the conversation as to where you have it. It's important to have the conversation as soon as possible, but you should also consider where that person is most comfortable. And not, when they're at their best. Maybe if they're a morning person, it could be in the morning. Just make sure that person is comfortable and ready. So step number 7, what are you gonna say? You might consider writing out some notes and having some bullet points. I definitely wouldn't suggest writing out a whole script or writing a skit to put on. But some of the things that you might want to say are, I've noticed whatever this change is, and I'm really concerned. Have you noticed it? Or are you worried about it? Maybe you could say, are you feeling okay? You just haven't been acting like yourself lately. Any sort of non-accusatory ways to address it, to ask the question. Step number 8, offer to go to the doctor with the person. Ask the person to see their doctor, to rule out their, any underlying things, to rule out whatever, but offer to go with them. You can say, there are lots of things that could be causing this change. Let's see if the doctor can help us figure it out. The sooner we know what's causing these problems, the sooner we can address it. Or even, it would give me peace of mind, and probably you peace of mind too if we talk to a doctor. Step number 9. Sometimes those conversations, they just don't go well the first time. But don't be discouraged. If that first conversation is not as successful as you'd hoped, or make note of what went right and what went wrong. That way, when you're preparing for future conversations, you can make note. Don't dismiss the changes that you're noticing simply because that person is reluctant to address them, or that your conversation didn't go the way you planned. So next, we're going to reach out for support. The Alzheimer's Association has a great amount of support. We can move forward. There's a plethora of information that is and resources that are available. And we can then, after we do that, we can see a doctor, or maybe we see the doctor and then visit the Alzheimer's Association. Next, please. So most people address concerns about memory, thinking, and behavior with their primary care physician first. Makes sense. However, in some cases, that primary care person is going to make a referral for the person to see a specialist. Some of the examples of specialists that you may be sent to are geriatricians who have additional training in conditions and diseases that are more common among people that are generally over the age of 65. A neurologist who specializes in diseases in the brain and nervous system, but not all neurologists specialize in Alzheimer's. Neuropsychologists, so these are doctors who can assess, diagnose, and treat psychological disorders that are associated with brain-based conditions. Psychiatrists and psychologists are also specialists that you may go to. We can move on. So the benefits of early detection, we now know what to look for and how to approach the conversation. So we can go on to the next slide. Paying attention to changes you notice in people, especially regarding their memory, thinking, or behavior, is important for early detection. So if you observe unusual behaviors or occurrences, take action. Start having those conversations. Maybe consider using the 10-step roadmap, but make sure you customize it to be the most supportive for that person that you're talking to. So there are a number of benefits to early detection. There's the planning for the future, letting that person have a voice in their care and what their future looks like. Access to treatment options. Maybe even participation in those clinical studies. Next, please. So we are going to go through with seeking a diagnosis. Next, we're going to do a quick little, what do you know? There's currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's. True or false? Yeah, you guys are so smart. It used to be believed that Alzheimer's could only be diagnosed with an autopsy. There are a number of assessments and tests that make it possible for healthcare professionals to diagnose Alzheimer's as well as other dementia-related diseases with a high degree of certainty. However, determining the cause of dementia can still sometimes be a little bit more difficult. We will move on. So some of the testing and assessments may include things like medical history, physical exam, depression screening, interviewing people that are close to you, family members, friends, maybe some lab tests, some mental cognitive status tests, some brain imaging like an MRI or a CAT scan, and then maybe some cerebrospinal fluid that they take and analyze. Next, please. There we go. Dementia symptoms always result in a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or other dementia. No. That's the long and the short. There's sometimes underlying issues. So the diagnostic process will vary from person to person depending on their specific situation and what the doctor feels is the right course of action. The diagnosis may be something other than Alzheimer's or a dementia disease. Stigma and misconceptions about Alzheimer's, like nothing can be done about it, can deter some people from actually seeking a diagnosis. So getting information and support is also a very critical step in this. So this is where we're going to talk about what the Alzheimer's Association can, just a brief little, what we can and can't do. So we can skip ahead. We're not going to watch, oh, well, I guess I took it out. So we have a phone service, 24/7 helpline. It is answered by master level clinicians who can just be a sounding board. They can't help you make decisions, but they can walk you through that decision-making process. Otherwise, we have online, alz.org. You could probably spend 4 days finding information on there. and resources. And then in communities, we do not have an Alzheimer's office here in the Brainerd Lakes area. I believe the closest one is probably Duluth. And those ladies that work up there are amazing. I'm not even gonna lie. I love to go up there and talk to them because they are the kindest, most caring bunch of people that you will ever find. In the Brainerd Lakes area, we do have an Alzheimer's support group. And I believe it's held at the Arboretum, I wanna say. I'm not sure. But we can, if somebody wants that information, we can definitely provide that. Are there any questions? Yeah. What is the 24-hour hotline number? Well, that is 1-800-272-3900. Of course. Any other questions? Of course, I will repeat the number. 1-800-272-3900. Yes. How often does the caregiver or care partner pass away before the person that has been diagnosed? I don't have an exact statistic, but it happens quite frequently. There's a myriad of reasons why. The stress, because it is very stressful. But that is why we do stress the importance of self-care and taking care of each other as caregivers.
We will. Oh, wow. We'll talk more about that in the weeks ahead as well, coming alongside and just the whole caregiving role as well.
We sure will.
Yeah.
That was just a little teaser to get you coming back. Mm-hmm. Invite your friends too. And I like snacks.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Thank you for the technical assistance.
It's really nice to be able to admit that you're not an expert at something and then have to read to become the expert to share it when you can just call somebody in who actually, that's their job, to share the information. So thank you. I really appreciate you.
I am so happy to be here.
And you'll stay if people have questions.
I will stay and hang around.
Awesome. Okay, let's end in prayer. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you just for the wisdom of the people who are part of the Alzheimer's Association. Lord, I just can't imagine the hours and the opportunity and the people that it takes to do this research and the studies. And so, Lord, we just thank you for giving the wisdom, gifting people to be able to think the way they think, see disease the way they see it, and interact with science the way they do. Lord, I also pray that you would just be with us. Give us the courage that we need to be good caregivers, good friends, good family members. Would you also just give us the courage to see what we need to see, what you would like us to see, and come alongside those that we need to love well and support well. And Lord, would you just honor our desire to be equipped to come alongside those that need us and need our support and need our love. I thank you for this time, and I just pray for everybody's safety over the week and look forward to everybody being back next week. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Thank you, everybody. Again, there are handouts. Remember, there's a little bookmark that has the 10 warning signs out on the table back there if you'd like that.